I'm so happy that this is still here. Well, now that we're here, we have to talk philosophy,
Oh heck.
which is a great uh, genre of classes to take at school, by the way. I minored in philosophy.
Hmm.
Really is some of the hardest shit you can take.
Jeez. I don't know.
But philosophy is the fucking best. It's so good. My favorite's epistemology, which is the study of knowledge,
Hmm.
which sounds very vague until you think about it. But since we're here now in the Philosophical Thoughts with Toenail channel, let's say we talk about epistemology.
All right. So what is the study of knowledge?
Well, it's simply to answer the question, what is knowledge? What do you think knowledge
Uh,
is?
knowledge is the ability to know something
Not a bad start. How do you know something?
because you have the confidence that you know something and you can picture it in your head.
That's not very convincing.
I don't know. It's I can't really think of the right words. It's like you think you have an understanding of what you think you know because you think you know the key aspects of a certain topic maybe.
Hmm. Yeah, you're getting there. So, I forget which classical philosopher. It was like Plato or Aristotle or one of them. Um, defined knowledge as a true belief. So, two parts. It has to be a statement like 2 + 2 = 4. It has to be true objectively. Also, you have to believe it. And if both those things are satisfied, then it's knowledge, which seems to make sense, right?
Yes.
Then sometime, not even until like the 1960s, and some guy added a bit of justification clause to that because he just thought of the simple thought experiment where you were driving down a highway and there was a field with a flock of sheep in it as you're going by. And there was a cardboard cutout of a sheep in the field. It looked just like a sheep. And as you were passing by and glanced at it, you saw the cardboard cutout and two other sheep and said, "Oh, this," and just thought there was three sheep in that field. But behind a bush that you couldn't see, there was another third sheep. So there was two sheep, another sheep behind a bush, and a fake sheep. You saw two sheep and a fake sheep and thought there's two sheep and thought there was three sheep. So you believe there's three sheep and there's three sheep in the field. Both of those are true. Under Plato, whoever's definition, that's knowledge. But you didn't arrive at that conclusion in the correct way. You thought a fake sheep was a sheep, even though there was three. So the definition of knowledge that's tend to be argued about these days is a justified true belief. It has to you have to not only believe something and it has to be true, but also you have to be justified in believing that it's true.
Hmm.
And most of epistemology, modern epistemology, is focused on is what qualifies as justification for your knowledge, which turns out is a really hard thing to nail down.
Heck.
Usually intro level philosophy classes tend to feel a lot like a history class.
Hmm.
So like 100 level philosophy, you'll get like history, philosophy, and like probably like philosophy of religion and metaphysics and a lot of that basic stuff. A lot of Descartes and Plato, and a lot of it kind of feels like a history class more than a philosophy class. The
Hmm.
200 level philosophy classes are where this shit gets really good.
Heck.
I recommend it. I loved it.
Yes, I will. I'll look into it. Oh, was it like a?
Philosophy of language was the single hardest course I've ever taken in my entire life. It was a 400 level course. It was harder than all of the math I had to take for my computer science stuff.
Dang.
Harder than any of the programming crap, any of that, anything. Any other philosophy of language was the single hardest thing I've ever taken in my life. To deconstruct how language works while using the language itself to do that, it's just it was absurd shit.
Well, dang. Was it like a difficult class or? I
It
mean,
was
well, I mean, you
it
already
was
said.
the most difficult class I've ever taken.
Like, you mean difficult is as in like to understand or to like to?
Yes, I mean the material was that hard to understand. I'll start looking up David Hume, philosophy of science. That's always the good place to start.
Hmm.
And then, well, of course, like Plato and shit like that. Plato, Aristotle, Socrates.
Ooga booga.
Who is
Ooga
this?
booga.
Bandit.
Oh heck.
Oh heck.
Oh,
What you guys doing?
talking about philosophy.
We're in the philosophy channel.
What?
When you're in here, you have to talk about philosophy.
What kind of philosophy? Philosophy.
What kind would you like to talk about?
I don't know. What kind is there to talk about?
There are so many. Let me go drain a lizard, and I'll give you some options.
Okay.
Oh, what a menu have we got for you tonight? We've got technology. We've got metaphysics.
What's yeah, the first one you said.
Physics,
No, the one that starts with a P.
epistemology.
Yeah.
What we in Cuddles were just talking about. It's about the theory of knowledge. What do you think
Alright.
knowledge is?
Um well you learn, gain knowledge, and knowledge just stays with you. It's like I don't know, it's like shit, I don't even know how to describe it to be honest with you.
It's
I mean,
kind of the whole point of that entire area of philosophy.
what, not being able to know how to explain things? But finding an explanation?
No, it exists because of the difficulty that there is to describe it and explain what it is to have knowledge. How
Ah,
can you differentiate having knowledge versus believing something that's not true?
fair. I mean, fuck. I don't know. That's kind of it's like a hella brain fart, if I'm being honest with you.
There's a lot of material on it. Unfortunately, I'm not as read up as I used. Although I'm thinking about a different thought experiment now that you're gonna like a lot better.
Okay.
Metaphysics is an area of philosophy that's about objects and concepts in the universe or in our minds and whether or not they actually exist. So things like numbers, right? Do numbers
Mhm.
exist, or are they things that we invented?
Well, if you were to look at it like that, well, I think well, I mean, yeah, numbers are totally invented.
So if there were no people in our universe, there would still not be like one Earth orbiting one sun, and there wouldn't be like 8 planets around the sun
Well, I mean, if you think about it
because
like
numbers
that,
wouldn't. Well, that's what a number is, right? It's just a mechanism to count.
yeah,
But we're the ones that gave it the name and the digits
yeah,
and the
because
concept in the
every
first.
word, like another thing that broke my, because me and my cousin, okay, so story is me and my cousin were sitting in my bed, and we were absolutely high, right? And like we were like, who thought of the name? Like, where did names come from? Who invented
Well,
names?
you can look up the word name's etymology easily. But you mean who thought of the concept of having a proper noun to identify each person?
Yeah, and like for instance, like
Even chimpanzees do that.
yeah,
Sure. They have howls. They each recognize each other by their own distinct voices.
mhm,
Those are like names.
yeah, for
And
sure,
that's pretty much what we did. And then they evolved when we learned how to talk a lot more diversely. So eventually, I imagined our different noises we made became names over a long period of time.
yeah, for sure. That's yeah,
This is a great segue to identity. You know your friends, you know your parents or your siblings or whatever by their names. You also know who they are when you see them.
yeah.
But how do you know it's them when you see them?
I mean, because everyone's unique in their own way.
Yeah, but by which criteria are you identifying them with? Because it looks like them, I bet.
Yeah. So yeah.
So this is a great thought experiment. It's called Swamp Thing. Swamp Thing experiment. Imagine you are standing in a swamp, like knee
Uh-huh.
deep swamp, and you're just surrounded by organic material, you know, water and plants and mud and all that shit.
Mhm.
And suddenly, without warning, you are struck by a lightning bolt, and it's so powerful, it completely atomizes you. And I mean, like, every fucking molecule is shredded to pieces, and every atom that used to make up your body and everything that you're comprised of brain, body, everything is spread and ejected out into the surrounding swamp, you know,
Yeah.
irreversibly. And in the same instant, the power in that lightning bolt was so strong. It just so happened, in the most improbable of all chances, recomprised organic material out of the swamp you were standing in into the exact same position and shape of every molecule you used to be composed of that you were just standing in, except it's made of entirely different atoms from the swamp. But there you are, even wearing the same fucking clothes that you were just standing in an instant before, meaning you never knew anything happened because your brain is exactly the same atom for atom, which means your mind is exactly the same. So is every memory you've ever had back to when you were 5 fucking years old, shit in your pants. And you have no idea that anything happened. Well, you. The question is that you?
Well, I mean, speaking in atoms, if the DNA is different, that means that that's not you,
No.
medically speaking.
Atom for atom, it's identical.
Well, then yeah, it should be you. If you're thinking medically, yeah, sure. Genetically, yeah, that's you.
Well, atoms are as small as you can get.
Yeah.
DNA is composed of many atoms, right? I'm
Mhm.
saying every atom you were comprised of is gone. And now in its place is suddenly an entirely new structure made of different atoms, but the same exact type in the same exact configuration that they were just in.
Mhm.
And I mean exactly. And you're saying that's you.
Yeah, I would say so. And you might ask how so? I mean, DNA is what's comprised of us, and it's what makes us us. And everyone
If
has different DNA. And if you're just
but
recomprised with the same DNA, and it's you.
DNA changes all the time. It's changing in you right now. Mutates constantly.
Well, sure, that's where you get, like, for instance, rapid cell growth, cancer, DNA. DNA makes cancer, just a mutation in the cell.
Sure. It also happens all the time with no results. Your DNA is not the same all the time. It changes all the time.
Hmm.
So how can that be still be you if your DNA is different? If DNA is what makes you the same person?
Well, I mean, if it's what's okay, so you're saying, all right, so lightning strikes you, you're a person.
We're talking about identity, right? How do
Yeah.
I know it's you? Maybe I'm looking at you in the swamp, and how do I know that that's you? How do you know it's you? If I told you that you actually were just obliterated and now it's not you anymore, you wouldn't have known any different because you have all the memories that previous you had.
Hmm.
So you would argue that nothing. What the hell are you talking about? I'm me, the same person I've always been. Could have happened to you just now, and you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know it.
That's crazy.
But is it you?
So you're
Is it
pretty.
enough to be you to be identical to the particle?
I don't know. That's crazy to think about.
That is the question about what identity is. We obviously, all of us use the concept of identity in our everyday lives. We recognize people. We recognize ourselves in the mirror. If we didn't, we wouldn't function very long in everyday life. How do I know it's you? Blah 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 blah. Right?
Hmm.
So we obviously believe and use the concept of identity. So how do we do it? Because obviously we can't be 100% sure. How do
Hmm.
I know you're not Swamp Thing?
You don't.
So does that mean then that Swamp Thing is you and they're the same person?
Uh, I guess I don't know.
That's an interesting question. Because now let's modify it and say that the exact same thing happens. You're standing in the swamp, except this time when you're destroyed, the lightning bolt creates two exact copies of you
Well, then that would be a
staring right
clone.
at
No?
each other, but they're both identical to you. They both just blinked and there was suddenly another one of them in front of you, in front of them. Identical to you, molecule to molecule, but the original one is gone. Its atoms are miles away. Are they both you? Can there be two yous? I thought identity, the whole concept of identity was about uniquely identifying a person. How could there possibly be two people if identity is a thing? And yet, that scenario, how ridiculously unlikely, is not impossible. There could be two identically constructed people, and they could be identical to the way you are right now. It's not impossible.
Yeah,
So,
doppelgangers.
so does that mean that identity is not a thing? There's no such thing as identifying people or yourself. Well, we sure don't act that way.
Yeah,
You
I see
don't
where you're coming from.
you don't put your parents through the third degree every time you see them to make sure they're not Swamp Thing.
Uh-huh.
Well, to reconcile our concept of identity with the way we tend to think and act in everyday life is the whole point of this thought experiment. And it's really hard to bring those two things together.
Yeah, for sure. What about, you know what else I was thinking of? Do you think our life is set up to go a certain way?
Explain.
Like, all right, so this branches off from the whole theory of past lives, or if every person is born in their own, let's say, this is gonna sound weird, but let's just say a person is born, right? Every time they're born, they live the same life, the same time period, but things could be different. So we're talking like dimensional theory and shit like that.
It's hard to argue. It's hard to argue anything that doesn't have evidence. I
Yeah.
mean, there is no such thing as memory before or after a person exists. So you kind of are just talking nonsense there. All
Well,
you
I
can talk
mean,
all you can talk about is what we can experience now.
yeah, fair. What's another thing you got?
Another thing I got.
Yeah.
Why is it that we understand each other when we talk to each other?
Because languages are crafted by people, intelligent beings, and then once people really
Mm,
learn the language and everything has a
disagree.
name for it.
No single person, no single being crafted any kind of language. Languages are evolved out of large and large groups of people, societies.
Oh yeah. Of course.
In fact, one person deciding a word means something that everyone else thinks it's not doesn't matter, because
Yeah,
all
of
that
course.
matters is that most people know what it means. We see evidence of that all the time. I think one of the most famous recent examples of that is the word literal, which society has deemed to no longer mean what it used to mean.
How so?
To literally be dying of laughter no longer means to be dying of laughter. It means to be just laughing really, really, really hard.
Well, sure. Everybody has
And everybody in
names.
the world now knows that that's what that means. But that is the opposite of what literally means.
Literally means to actually be happening.
Literally means to be taken at face value of what it says on the tin. To be literally dying of laughter means you would die. But when someone says that on Instagram or Twitter or something like that, everybody knows that no one is calling 911 for them. They know they're being hyperbolic and saying, I'm laughing so hard, like that it's hard to describe how hard I was laughing.
Hmm.
That is an evolution of the definition of a word. No one person decided that. Society at large trended towards it, and the definition changed. That's how language works. That's how the definition of words work.
Okay.
So, for me to understand what you mean when you say the word literally requires both of us to understand what you mean when you say it. But it actually is even more complicated than that, because if I know that literal doesn't mean literal anymore, and so do you, that's not enough for us to understand each other. Because if you think about it, when I say I literally died of laughter, how do you know that I know that literal doesn't mean that anymore? You could think that I meant I was going to die of laughing, and you'd be concerned for me.
Hmm.
So, to me, for us to understand each other, it not only requires you to believe the same definition as I do, us both to believe the same thing, it also requires us both to believe that the other believes the same thing.
So talking and everything is not a one. It's not a
Oh,
one-way thing.
I'm not
It's a
done.
two-way
It
thing.
actually goes back one more. For me to understand you, saying the word literal, I have to know what literal means. I have to understand that you know what literal means. And then I need to know that you know that I know what literal means. Because if I don't know that you know that I know, then I'm just making an assumption that you know. So it actually goes 3 times. And only then can we communicate successfully about the definition of the word literal or any word, right? And we do that with every word that we speak with every other person all the time. Our brains are just really, really good at that. That's why we have an entire large section of our brain that neurologists call the language center. Does all that shit for us really quickly. It's why we're so much smarter than everything else on this planet is because we can speak in complex languages. And it's all based on that three-way assumption of truths that I understand something, I believe that you understand it, and I also believe that you believe that I understand it. And then you do the same for me. And when all those things work, we can speak to each other.
Damn.
Yeah.
Shit.
Peaceful.
What would the world be like without religion?
Who could possibly imagine that? Religion is probably the single most driving factor of the evolution of the human race in the entire history of the world.
Yeah, it is.
To say what it would have been like without it is to say what would the humans be like if we didn't have fucking trees. Good question.
We would all be wanted for treason.
Ugh. So philosophy of religion is a very popular topic in philosophy, but you have to think smaller.
Yeah, smaller
Religion
scale.
is based on concepts of faith. Faith is, by definition, a belief without evidence. Um, and that's what most religions are based on, a belief structure that requires no evidence for various other reasonings, right? Philosophy of religion, though, it's not about would people be happier or would it be more peaceful and stuff like that. If you want to talk about questions like that, that's more uh, ethics,
Hmm.
actually. Um, how do people live ethically and like be by more peaceful? I could infer that you mean how do the most people live the happiest lives they can possible at the same time, without infringing on other people.
Hmm.
And that's an ethical question, and philosophy of ethics is all about that. Um, Philosophy of religion is more concerned with the concept of faith and belief without evidence, and the concepts of God. Focuses a lot on the Abrahamic religions, God being an omniscient, omnipotent being, and all the problems that arise with that. And it overlaps with metaphysics a lot, with stuff like identity, right?
Hmm.
How can there be two of you if your religion says that you were created uniquely, as a son of a benevolent, intelligent creator and stuff like that. Um, so there's overlap with metaphysics in religion stuff, but your question is more. Mm, it's a rhetorical question, but it's more about like utilitarianism. Would the average person be happier, in parentheses, because it was more peaceful, if religion didn't exist? That's a good question. But like I'm sort of beating around the bush here and saying like that question leads more questions like, how do you define more peaceful? First, you have to define more peaceful in order to know if it is more peaceful.
Yeah, I understand. I like don't, but I do at the same time. You know what I mean?
Happiness is usually used as a rating for good and bad and stuff like this. If more people can be happier while they're alive, then maybe it is a better thing. But that's a really vague statement and not really something I'm familiar with arguing.
I'll tell you what, though, I'm
Ethics and religion and stuff like that is hard. It tends to get fiery and emotional, and
really quick.
has to do with happiness. I've always preferred things like metaphysics and like whether or not the concepts of numbers would exist if humans didn't exist.
Damn, rip humanity without the sun.
Yes.
I mean, if the sun, either way, we would probably, the planet wouldn't survive as long as the sun, because the sun would turn into a red giant, and then the red giant wouldn't be engulfed.
Eat us.
You got another
It will eat
billion
us.
years.
Yeah.
Oh, it will definitely. Humans will probably. Well, humans will. I assume will definitely be extinct. I don't think that we're going to be able to survive that. And if we do, we're going to be very
Not with
different.
that attitude.
Well, I'm sorry. Humans are pretty stupid. Look what we've already done to this planet. So
Most of them.
yeah. If like fossil fuels were never invented, the planet would be in much better shape than it is now.
Yeah, but we wouldn't have things like the internet and Discord and DayZ and
Oh shit.
and Hop Devil IPA.
Mm. There would be no philosophical thoughts with those.
Maybe not with me, but with some primordial ape-like equivalent of me. Primordial thoughts with Toenail.
With Toenail.
What great light in sky? What if great light in sky not light?
What if light, or what if great light?
Why fire hot? Why fire hurt hands?
Yeah, Tony. I've been recording this whole time. Imagine if I use some of those
God
things.
damn it, Cuddles.
Fucking Cuddles, bro.
Stop recording me when I'm in the philosophical channel and I've been drinking all night. That's not fair.
That's not fair. I'm really hot.
Like, imagine if I just take them out of context.
Oh shit.
Just like Toenail's like, me, why fire hot? Why in my hand?
I give you free permission to take anything from this conversation out of context.
Yeah, as long as it's funny. No,
Oh,
fuck
yes.
it. Do whatever you want.
As long as it's objectively funny.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
By my definition of objectively funny.
Which still isn't that hard to satisfy. Doesn't
Wow,
mean anything
that
negative.
hurts.
That doesn't mean anything negative. With the content he has, it would be nice.
I feel like I should feel insulted, but I'm struggling
No.
to get at why.